The old maxim is true, one bad apple really does spoil the bunch. Research reveals that in terms of boosting a team's productivity, it's better to remove a toxic employee than it is to add a superstar. Hey leader, David Burkus here, organizational psychologist and author of 4 best-selling books on helping leaders and teams do their best work ever, including teams that have difficult employees who maybe don't want to do any work at all. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how to deal with a difficult employee. And this is, let's be honest, this is one of the worst parts of a leader's job. Leaders at all levels, this is one of the worst parts of their job. But it is a crucial job because the old maxim is true. Bad apples, toxic or difficult employees really do ruin the team. And the truth is, you know this as a leader, that the team is more important than the talent. So it doesn't matter how talented they are. If they're ruining that team, we need to deal with it. In fact, research from Harvard Business School professors Michael Housman and Dylan Miner showed that toxic employees really do drain a team, so much so that the productivity gains you get from removing a difficult member of the team are greater than the productivity gains you would get from adding a superstar, high-performing employee to the team. In addition, their toxic or sometimes fraudulent behavior is contagious. According to professors Stephen Dimmock and William Gherkin, even your most honest employees are more likely to commit fraudulent behavior if there's an existing member of your team that is exhibiting dishonest behaviors. So it's contagious, and that means you're gonna have to deal with it. So in this episode, we're gonna outline 5 steps to dealing with difficult employees to help make your job better in dealing with them, to help make your team's job better in working with hopefully a less difficult employee. Let's get started. The first step to dealing with a difficult employee is to identify the problem. First of all, this means you cannot ignore the problem, right? It reflects poorly on you as a leader, and as we already covered, it will infect the team with increasing toxicity, possibly fraudulent behavior, and certainly demotivation and decreases in productivity if you ignore the problem. But when we say identify the problem, we also mean you need to label the problem. You need to get very specific on why their behavior is a problem, or else you're not going to be able to give them the tools they need to correct it, or you're not going to give you the tools you need to correct it, if you catch my drift. Now, generally, all difficult employees' behavior falls into one of 3 categories, possibly 2 of these categories at the same time. Category 1, the employee is not fulfilling their responsibilities. They have a set of defined tasks and they're just not doing them. And this isn't necessarily that there's a performance issue like, oh, they are incapable of doing it, they need more training, etc. This is they don't want to put in the work. Category number 2, the employee has a bad attitude. So maybe they're working, but they're constantly complaining. They're part of that class of recreational complainers that finds that they just like griping to their coworkers, that the favorite part of their day is sitting in the kitchenette or around the water cooler just trashing other people. And while that might entertain them for some perverse reason, you can see why it would drag the whole team down. And the third category of difficult employees are ones that undermine your authority. Sometimes you get people who are, or at least seem like team players. You get people who are fulfilling their responsibilities, but when you're not around, they're saying things and doing things to undercut your authority. Maybe they're doing it because they think for some reason that's gonna help them get promoted. Regardless, undermining your authority does not serve the team, and so it's going to need to be addressed. The second step to dealing with a difficult employee is to examine it closer, zoom in on it. We've already identified it as one of those 3 categories, but now we need to dig a little bit deeper and figure out what's possibly driving the behavior. Sometimes they're internal factors that may not be corrected. Maybe they just are sociopathic or narcissistic. But to be honest with you, more often than not, there are some external factors at play. Maybe they're constantly complaining because work is a coping mechanism to a difficult situation at home. And an honest conversation, once you've gained their trust, could help realize that the team is here to support them. And so they shouldn't be undermining your authority or criticizing people because that doesn't support the team. Maybe they know they're underperforming, right? Maybe they know that they're struggling to even begin the tasks because of some lack of motivational issue or because of some disbelief in their own abilities or lack of confidence. In which case, coming at them from a you just need to get to work is not going to help the situation. So we identify the problem in step 1, and then we need to examine it closer to help us prepare for the conversation about how we're going to turn this behavior around. That brings us to step 3, which is to give direct feedback. Give clear and specific feedback about the behaviors that you're witnessing and why they need to change. The goal here isn't to make the person feel attacked, right? And when you're being more subjective and when you're being more broad, you can make them feel attacked. Oh, you're so negative, so toxic, or you're so mean to your other employees, but that doesn't help change behavior. Or you may think you are giving constructive feedback, but the other members of your team feel that because you're saying it in this manner or with this tone, you are attacking their ideas. We need to get specific on the behavior that we're observing here and the consequences or the effects that that behavior is having on you and on the team. If we're not specific, we have no hope of helping them identify when they're about to behave in a similar fashion and turn that around. And by the way, if you can't name specific behaviors, then you haven't examined it close enough. So go back to step 2, you're not ready for the step 3 conversation. Now, the 4th step to dealing with difficult employees is to explain the consequences. It's not enough to give direct feedback of you're doing this behavior and this is the problem, but we need to give people the consequences of continuing to act in that undesired behavior. There's 2 types of consequences here, by the way, that we need to speak to. I mean, the first is personal, right? That you will not continue to tolerate somebody who's undermining the team or undermining your authority or who's consistently negative. So there's personal consequences here. And that means, by the way, that they will be fired or that might potentially limit their career. Those are personal consequences. But you may get a lot of traction in moving the motivation to change if you explain the team-wide consequences as well. If you just pointed to those specific behaviors and then you can point to how those behaviors are letting down the team, are letting down the organization, are making it harder for other members of the team to do their work, then you tap into an almost pro-social desire to change. A lot of times people's bad behavior is done because they think there are no consequences, or they think the consequences are just them. And when you point out that the consequences of their negative behavior go downstream and have a much wider effect on people that they may care about, you stand a better chance of motivating them to change. Now, the 5th and final step, and in truth, it's not really a final step, it's a constant step, is to document everything. Meaning, as you're identifying the problem, document the behaviors that you are witnessed. Time, date, the specific behavior, who else was involved. As you're examining it closer, as you're doing research, make sure that gets collected. Maybe that research comes in the form of comments from other peers. Document the comments from the members of the team who are having a problem with this difficult employee. Make sure you're collecting performance reviews or documenting any sort of coaching conversations you have as you head into step 3 and step 4. Make sure you document that you had the conversation where you are getting specific about the behaviors and talking about the consequences. Now, documentation is important for 2 reasons. Now, number 1, and my hope is that as you turn the behavior around, you'll be able to use this documentation to show them the progress that they're making. Hey, look, a year ago, we were talking about this issue, etc., around how your colleagues felt attacked when we were in meetings and discussing ideas. And now look at the way that you're supporting their ideas and look at the consequences of that, which is that we as a team are getting better and offering better solutions. But the other reason that you document, and this is the more legal or HR reason that you document, is that some difficult employees will not change. You'll have these conversations, you'll identify the problem, you'll dig deeper, you'll talk about the behaviors that need to be changed and the consequences of continuing in those courses of action, and some employees will just continue in that course of action, either because they think they know better, or they think you're not recognizing their brilliance, or they really are just like a sociopath or a narcissist. Some people can't be changed. But if you document everything, you'll have proven that your job as a leader was to help that person get better. You did it, and they didn't want to come along. And so if it comes time to invite them to be successful on a different team, you'll have the documentation you need to stand on that decision, whether you have the authority to fire them or not. Sometimes you get the ability to fire them immediately and then you've protected yourself with that documentation. And sometimes you need to hand that documentation up to somebody else who can make that decision. In either case, you'll be glad you documented everything. And in fact, in all cases, whether they change or not, you'll be glad you documented everything. Now, the final step here, or the final word on dealing with difficult employees, is just for you, not for them. It's that, look, this is hard. This is perhaps the suckiest part of a leader's job. This is not what you envisioned when you thought about taking on that team role, but this is a vital role and the team needs you to deal with it. So cut yourself some slack. These conversations will not go as brilliantly as I just laid out. They will not go according to plan. That's not your fault. Give yourself some grace. Dealing with difficult employees is difficult, but it can't be ignored. Because if it's ignored, if it's not dealt with, it will continue to infect the team and continue to block them from getting better. But if it is dealt with, you either turn that person around or your team gets the productive benefit of not having to work with that person anymore. In either case, you've helped your team get better. You've demonstrated that you are there for them as the team leader, and you've put that team on a path to doing their best work ever. Oh, and one more thing. If you're turning around the behavior of a difficult employee, you're going to have not one, but many feedback conversations over the next couple of months and maybe even years. So you're going to get better at giving feedback. You're going to want to get better at giving feedback for your whole team. So you're going to want to check out this video on the secret to giving great feedback. This one. In fact, leave me some feedback on it after you watch it.